Welcome back to our conversation with WBZ security analyst Ed Davis. And Ed, we were talking in the first segment about the debacle at the Capitol on Wednesday. I want to pull back and get your sense of the bigger picture with regard to police attitudes and the sort of political environment under which police are functioning. It's been a tough year for police in America. We all know about what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd, other incidents like that, the subsequent backlash, calls for defunding the police and the whole debate over that. And then here in Massachusetts, just a few days ago, one of the most sweeping police accountability laws in the nation was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor. Is it your sense that police feel under siege? And if they do, is there any validity there? And if there isn't, what needs to be done about it?
Well, I think that they do feel under siege. These incidents that you've described have been terrible, and they've eroded trust in the institution of policing in the United States. But I really believe that the average officer on the street is doing the best that he or she can to protect the community. And I think that the publication of video from the officer's cameras, if it's handled properly, will show that there's many more positive interactions with the community by exponentially than there are the type of horror shows that we've seen that have been brought to the public's attention. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the part of police to reestablish trust. But police are human beings, John. And if they get the message that the community does not want them to use force, they will step back from that. And unfortunately, force is necessary in some of the incidents that police run into. So the question is, how do the police judge what the community expects from them? They do what their sergeants tell them. They do what the community wants ultimately. And I think they're confused as to exactly what that is right now.
Do you believe the Massachusetts police reform law is a good idea, bad idea, or somewhere in between?
Many of the things in that reform law were being fought for by police chiefs for many years. I remember Paul Evans and I going to the State House and having conversations about police officer standard and training and other positive developments. So there's things in there that are extremely important and that I support. There are things in there that I don't support. I mean, there was a whole debate in many legislatures across the country about police use of tear gas, and it's been outlawed in places. And I would just ask the legislators to look at what happened the other day and ask them how they expect the police to deal with tens of thousands of people who are rushing them. If you don't have tear gas, the only thing you've got is a gun. It is just, some of the changes have been not well thought out, to be quite honest with you.
Let me close with this, Ed. Once this segment airs, I'm going to get emails, because I always do, from a handful of people accusing me of being anti-cop. Maybe some will accuse you of the same. And, you know, I'm not anti-cop. I've worked alongside cops, live alongside cops. There's no more honorable public servant than a good cop. But we have seen in this past year incidents, not a majority of police interactions, but some interactions that are obviously heinous. There has been reporting that there's a significant percentage of police officers in America who also belong to white supremacist groups. And we're talking, maybe 10%. One article I saw named that figure. And we saw police unions, for the most part, backing Donald Trump. And we saw bitter and at times disingenuous opposition to the police reform movement here in Massachusetts by the local police unions. Are police unions a right-wing force in this country, or is that unfair?
John, I can say unequivocally that police are not a racist organization. That's not the case. I worked with police my whole life, 40 years. My dad was a cop. I go back to when I was a child. Racism is as prevalent in policing as it is in the society in general, and that's it. So I question numbers that talk about high surveys that talk about high numbers in that regard. Police are trying to do a very difficult job, and they're trying to do it the best that they can. But some of the things that we've seen this year are troubling, and I think the systems that have been put in place, one part of the bill that was passed requires that police officers act affirmatively if they see violence occurring or improper acts on the part of their colleagues. Sergeants need to supervise their officers. And then unions have to understand that there are some people that just shouldn't be on the police department. If those three things happen, there'll be a world of change in policing.
Here's hoping. Ed Davis, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.